Welcome, everybody. It's so lovely to have us all here in this wonderful warm room and to be able to share this amazing celebration of Mel. I think that without Mel, the world would be a very different place. The incredible wisdom that he has shown in being able to compile and understand, and then also really to present Kaplan's writings to us and to the whole world has made a huge difference. We think about the butterfly effect, that each little butterfly that lands on the planet has an opportunity to move it ever so slightly. But Mel, you have not even moved it slightly. You have moved it tremendously because you have preserved something, and not just preserved it, but you have turned it into a magnificent work of art that generations and generations of scholars and rabbis and students and people seeking wisdom will be able to use for really forever. And so, I personally want to thank you tremendously for your contributions and to share not only my great admiration, but also my best wishes for Ad Mea Ve'esrim, that you should live to 120 in health and well-being and enjoy all of the fruits of your incredible labor. I would like to introduce you all to our MC for the evening. We have a number of wonderful people for you to listen to. And so Eric Kaplan will be telling you a little bit about everybody. He is the vice president and academic advisor for the Mordecai Kaplan Center for Jewish Peoplehood. And he is rather an eminent Kaplan scholar himself, as well as somebody who shares his wisdom with future generations. So please, I give the floor to you, Eric.
Good afternoon, good evening, depending on your time zone. And but I have the pleasure of being a co-founder, vice president, academic advisor to the Kaplan Center. And the reason why I mention it, there's only one other person who has the same collection of titles, and that's Mel Scult. And when I reflect upon that, I remember, or I think about the little ditty from Sesame Street, where it says, one of these things is not like the other. And that's the way I definitely feel as I reflect on the fact that I have the same titles as you do, Mel. I first personally met Mel in 1993, right when your biography of Kaplan was published. I was working on my doctorate, and in these years, Mel has been to me personally, a mentor. There's no other way of putting it, helping me in the early days when I was just finding my way, supporting my work when I started to actually have some work. And sometimes I see us together in a board meeting, and I can't believe that we're actually, I have the pleasure of actually now being in some way a colleague of yours. So I'm part of the large collection of people here who feel this deep connection and gratitude for everything that you've done, not only your scholarship, but more importantly, at least is your mentorship and your interest in the work that other people are doing. So, as was said, I get the pleasure of introducing the various different people who are speaking today. And one of the people who the person we're starting off with, Arnie Eisen, couldn't be here personally, but he very much wanted his thoughts on Mel to be included in the program. So he sent us this really wonderful recording, which we'll play in a second. Professor Arnie Eisen is one of the foremost authorities on American Judaism. He's the Chancellor Emeritus of the Jewish Theological Seminary and professor of Jewish thought there. He is the author, among other works, of Galut, Modern Jewish Reflection on Homelessness and Homecoming, Rethinking Modern Judaism, Ritual, Commandment, Community, and The Chosen People in America, a study in Jewish religious ideology, the last one being what kind of first put him in the realm of thinking about Mordechai Kaplan. Those of you who have been with the Kaplan Center for a while will remember that he participated in this wonderful conversation that we had with the late David Ellenson and Nancy Fuchs Kramer, who also will speak later on in our program about Kaplan's relevance to this particular moment. So, Sheridan, if you could cue Arnie's comments.
Hi, everyone. I'm sorry I can't be with you today in person to honor Mel Scult, but I'm so glad that I can be with you virtually this way to pay tribute to Mel for his friendship and his many years of contribution to all of us in the Jewish community, and especially to all of us who teach Judaism and want to teach the writings and example of Mordechai Kaplan. I'm going to start with Kaplan himself, as Mel would have done, I think. I actually met Mordechai Kaplan only once. I was in Jerusalem doing my PhD at Hebrew University. Kaplan was living, I think he was 95 at the time, on Ibn Ezra Street in Jerusalem. And I went to see him one unforgettable day to talk to him about his writings. I was focusing my dissertation work on the idea of the chosen people, which, as I suspect you all know, was not Kaplan's favorite idea in the treasury of Jewish thought. And with all of the chutzpah or insouciance or seriousness of a young graduate student, I asked Kaplan whether he had ever chosen his mind about whether changed his mind about his idea of the chosen people idea. And Kaplan rose from his chair and pounded on the desk a little bit and let me know in no uncertain fashion that he had indeed never changed his mind about the idea of the Jews being God's chosen people. And then I asked him a more personal question, perhaps, because we know that Kaplan had thought of making Aliyah in the 1930s, and I myself at that moment was thinking of making Aliyah, which my wife and I eventually did. And I asked Kaplan if he had ever regretted deciding to spend his life working for the future of Jewish civilization in the United States instead of in Israel. And this time, somewhat more quietly and thoughtfully, he said, no. I've had many, many questions I would have liked to ask Kaplan that day and since then, as I've been teaching and writing about American Judaism. And sadly, I never got to ask them to Kaplan personally. We're all left with Kaplan's many articles and books and speeches and memories. But there is one more legacy from Mordechai Kaplan that all of us have, thank goodness. And that legacy, which we have to guide us, is Mel Scult. For me, a scholar of 20th century American Jewish religious thought and practice, and perhaps most important, a committed Jew who is ever trying to figure out how we can lend greater meaning to our inherited tradition and revitalize our Jewish communities, Mel's work has been an indispensable gift. He, first of all, opened Kaplan's diaries to all of us, judiciously selecting from the hundreds and hundreds of pages that Kaplan penned and showing us a lyrical Kaplan, a Kaplan who is, I think, more hesitant, more, if I could put it this way, even more interesting than Kaplan is in some of the published writings. Kaplan needed to be translated for the contemporary audience. He speaks very much the language that he was raised in and that he spoke in, remember, born in 1881. And Mel has rendered Kaplan authentically in a voice that speaks loudly to contemporary Jewish searchers. Mel's Kaplan is a seeker. Mel's Kaplan resonates with the spirituality that is so important to Jews today. And he does so in a way that is true to who Kaplan was, without distorting Kaplan, without leaving Kaplan behind. We could have just said Dayenu at this point for that contribution, but Mel has done more. If you've ever tried to teach Kaplan, one of the issues you have is that the writings are so voluminous. And Mel has done a great job of summing up Kaplan's message, most recently in a little pamphlet called 8 Core Principles of Kaplan's Philosophy, thereby making the master accessible and applicable to a wide variety of audiences today. Perhaps most important of all, Mel has demonstrated by example. This is precious to me. He's demonstrated by his example what it means to be a faithful student and protege and friend without sacrifice of independent judgment or intellectual integrity. Think about it. We have very few examples of this in the contemporary world, and I'm really grateful that Mel has given us all that example. For me, it's cause for thanksgiving and for praise. If you want to teach Kaplan, either to Reconstructionists in particular or to any other audience, I recommend the anthology that Mel put together with Emmanuel Goldsmith entitled Dynamic Judaism, The Essential Writings of Mordechai Kaplan. It's no easy task, as I've already said, to select passages from Kaplan's huge writings, which spanned more than half a century. Kaplan's writings span the shelves of many libraries and fill up many file cabinets. But what Scult and Goldsmith have done is find a way to bring Kaplan home to all of us by organizing him so admirably and so sensibly into a small number of chapters, each of which has selections not just from Kaplan's more famous works, but from the lesser known works, like, for example, The Greater Judaism in the Making from 1960, or Questions Jews Ask from 1956. For example, the chapter on Kaplan's lifelong writings on what he called the God concept include expository prose, but also poetry from Questions Jews Ask that expand and challenge what Kaplan has to say in Judaism Without Supernaturalism from 1958, or the brief sections devoted to Zionism and the State of Israel, offered in the context of Kaplan's ideas of Jewish peoplehood, which of course he pioneered, speak to the present moment rather directly with remarkable presence. Kaplan worried, for example, in 1960, that Arabs, quote, contest the Jews' right to the land, and that, quote, the State of Israel finds itself completely isolated. But he also worried that while Israel had, quote, succeeded in providing a precarious measure of physical security for about 2 million Jews at that point, it had increased, quote, the spiritual insecurity of all Jews by failing to augment the generative and self-renewing potency of Jewish peoplehood. That is quintessential Mordechai Kaplan, and I would personally recommend for the present moment, take another look at Kaplan's work, A New Zionism from 1955. Kaplan here and elsewhere declares the goal of Zionism to be the revitalization of Jewish peoplehood. Mel, let me say to you directly that I had the chance, you remember last year, to see you in action with JTS students, JTS undergraduates. I had the chance to see you making Kaplan live for a new generation of young American Jews. I had the chance to witness you wrestling with Kaplan in real time and exciting these students about the creative reconstruction of Judaism as a civilization with the helpful guidance of Mordechai Kaplan. It was pure joy, Mel. I know that you enjoyed it, but you should know that the students loved it, and I loved it too. It's also, for me, a great pleasure always to watch a great teacher in action and learn from them. And all of us, whatever age we are, enjoy that, learning from great teachers. If we are teachers, watching them in action, picking up tips, watching the moves that you made, it was really a great pleasure. So on behalf of all of our students, Mel, yours and mine and all of American Jewry, I want to thank you for what you've done for Jewish studies, what you've done for Jewish life. I thank you with all my heart, and I wish you many more years of good health and good work. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Arnie. Even though you won't see the thanks for a while. Um,
Can I
Karen,
say, I think I'm at my own funeral.
uh, God forbid, but we're glad that we have the opportunity to share our feelings for you when you can still be here. Um, Karen Morris is the principal of the Dor Hadash Religious School, but for many of us, we know her because of her being such a significant partner to Jeffrey Shine in the various different educational projects he's done through the Kaplan Center these last number of years. And Karen is going to speak now to a very special project that happened that involved. Well, I'll let her explain it, but it's a nice surprise, I think, and we'll hear from those people, throughout this webinar. Karen?
Okay, yeah, thank you so much, Eric. And it is am I coming through okay on Zoom? Is my reception good? Okay, awesome. Yeah, it's such an honor to be here. I think I can honestly say I have not met you, Mel, in person, but only in webinars. So it's just wonderful to learn so much about your writings and your past and just all of your accomplishments. And I really feel like I know you through Jeffrey. As a person working with Jeffrey the last few years. And I'm just so pleased that Jeffrey brought me into the Kaplan Center. I work at Congregation Dor Hadash as the education director principal for our religious school in Pittsburgh. And I did have the opportunity to have lunch with Jeffrey yesterday because he happens to not be here, but was in Pittsburgh for the funeral of his cousin. So we did get together yesterday. So is this a complete surprise to Mel about the contest? Yes? I'm not sure. But anyway, the idea came up to honor Mel for his 90th birthday to reach out to the teens. And what Jeffrey explained to me is that Mel had a certain importance connection to teens. Like the work of Kaplan should be accessible to all ages, not, just people that are at a certain point. So those ideas were really important to Mel and his work in engaging the youth. So we decided to reach out to teens, anyone basically bar bat mitzvah age, b mitzvah age and up, and created a contest with some questions. There was a literary opportunity and an artistic opportunity. And we had 14 entries, which we were very happy about, ranging in age from 12 to about 17, really the kids just preparing for bar bat mitzvah and into high school. And the question, so they are here with us today. I believe our three, we identified three winners, and the literary contest did come with a specific prize. They get $1,000, each of the two main winners, letters for their college, for their curriculum vitae, and all of that from the Kaplan Center. Each person who entered is also getting a beautiful certificate sent in the mail. So it's really wonderful. Between Elishava and myself, we had an opportunity to speak with many of them, and they just felt so honored and connected just to the ideas of Kaplan. I just wanted to mention the question. Our two literary students who you're going to hear from today answered, is there any reason to identify with the Jewish people aside from being convinced the Jews are unique? So that we're going to hear from them today on that question. And we will also see an artistic entry. And I'm going to share with you the bio. So we're going to hear from Netta Ruderman, who is a writer and equestrian. Is that I'm not sure how you say that, who lives in Oberlin, Ohio. And she's a member of the class of 2029 at Lake Ridge Academy. So if we think about it, there's Netta. I'm not sure if Netta will be coming up in a moment. And we will also hear from Zora Miller, who's in 7th grade and is a member of Congregation Berith Shalom in Troy, New York. Zora loves writing, reading, drawing, and running cross country and volunteers at a puppy rescue. So we will hear from her, and then a little bit later on, we will see a video that Vanella Shapiro, who's 14, created, born in Sudbury, Ontario, Canada, made Aliyah with her family at age 5, currently lives in Mevo Modi'in, Israel, and attends Ort Shalhevet Junior High School in Shoham, Israel, and loves sloths, I am told. And I believe became connected through Camp Chavaya with reconstructing Judaism in the movement in Kaplan. So I see our teens are here. So congratulations to all of you. And the judges, we had a few judges. We really enjoyed reading your essays, and it was not easy to choose you. So I think with that, we will move on. Is it time? Whatever the schedule is, Sheridan, to hear from our teens. And I think they're going to be interspersed with some other speakers. So it's such an honor to be here. Mazal tov.
Yeah, we thought we would share the joy throughout the webinar, and we would start with you, Zora, if that's possible.
Yeah, thank you so much. So my name is Zora Miller. I'm 12 years old, and my essay is called Wrapped in a Quilt of Connection. I'm half Jewish, but growing up, we didn't celebrate Judaism much in my family. Sure, we lit our menorah each Hanukkah, but we attended church, not synagogue, and I didn't really consider myself Jewish. But there was something about Jewish holidays that felt special. I loved singing with my relatives around the Passover table together, hearing the stories, and eating my grandmother's matzo ball soup. It felt like I was wrapped in a quilt of Judaism, a square for each person, and all of our squares woven together into one magnificent quilt of song and traditions. When I was 11, I asked my mom to sign me up for Hebrew school, and the next summer I switched to a Reconstructionist Jewish summer camp instead of YMCA camp. I decided I wanted to celebrate bat mitzvah, which required joining the synagogue. My parents were supportive, but weren't seeking to join a synagogue themselves. The board voted to allow me to become the first child in their congregation to have her own membership. I love sitting with the rabbi in her office for bat mitzvah tutoring each week, her glass figurine of Jonah in sitting inside a whale watching me from its perch while I sing the prayers I practiced. Recently, my mom and I attended synagogue for the first time. I could sit at those services forever. I love wrapping myself in the words of the Torah. The Hebrew embraces me and flows through me like a song. What made me want to identify with the Jewish people when my family isn't observant? It's the feeling of togetherness with so many other Jewish people across the world. We are all connected, no matter what gender, race, or age we are. We're part of the quilt of Judaism, and I'm sewing myself a square. Thank you, and happy birthday, Mel.
Oh, thanks for that, Zora. That's wonderful. Definitely what we see that in Kaplan, and thanks to Mel, we know that he got it from his teacher of sociology, the concept of we feeling. Any of us who've read Mel's work know learned that. So our next speaker is Nancy Fuchs-Kramer. Dr. Fuchs-Kramer is Associate Professor Emerita of Religious Studies and the founding director of the Department of Multi-Faith Studies and Initiatives at the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College, where she was ordained in 1982. Nancy is a past president of the Reconstructionist Rabbinical Association and a founding board member of the Interfaith Center of Philadelphia. Among other work, she is the author of Parenting as a Spiritual Journey and the co-author of Strangers, Neighbors, Friends, Muslim, Christian, Jewish Reflections on Compassion and Peace. And if I could add a personal note, she's written some wonderful articles on Kaplan and on how RSC students respond to Kaplan, and is a wonderful teacher and a wonderful speaker. So it is a joy to have you here, Nancy.
Well, it is a pleasure to be here and an honor. And I want to start by thanking Eric, thank Jeffrey and Elisheva and Jane for all that you're doing to keep the legacy alive. When I started teaching at RSC in 1987, Jacob Staub assigned me to teach Recon 1. I think Jacob is on this call. I was a second-generation Reconstructionist, so I had some stories to tell, and I had even met Kaplan once and had a memorable encounter with him and with my boyfriend at the time at that camp, It was Camp Sedgwin we were, and he was a JTS student. That relationship did not last, but that happened in 1971, and Kaplan made an impression on me. I could tell that story, but not for 13 weeks. I needed more material, and I needed Kaplan to come alive as Arnie said so beautifully, Kaplan writes, but he's even more interesting in some ways as a person. So thank God there was Mel. Mel visited my class every year. I seem to remember sometimes I would have the last session in my home in the living room, and Mel would sit in my living room and enchant the students with his stories. Some of the stories ended up in biographies he wrote. Some were embedded in the diaries, which at that time were not published. Excerpts from the diaries started to appear online long before the diaries themselves became books. And I was avid at assigning diary entries and not just his writing. One of the things I remember him saying very vividly was that, I don't remember if I'm going to quote this exactly right, but Mel said at the beginning of each talk, he said, in order to organize a life, you need one good game. And for me, that game has been Mordecai Kaplan. And I think he's so right about that, even as I think about how the situation we currently face in our world today and how we're pulled in so many different directions and the need to focus on the game that really matters. In recent years, Eric didn't mention this, but I've been teaching online at the Aleph Ordination Program, where Reb Zalman is remembered, both by his writings and by the stories, because the stories are actually, in Reb Zalman's case, better than the writings. And thank God there were many, many good stories about Reb Zalman, but I digress. The point here is these stories make a huge impression on me and the students. The first story, which is Mel told every year, and I'm sure it's written up many different places, and you've all heard it 100 times, but I will just repeat it because the students would always quote it in their final exams, which was that it's about Ira Eisenstein, remembering that when Rabbi Kaplan summered with them at a beach resort. They rented a house there. I wouldn't call it a resort, but they rented a house. And one morning, according to Eisenstein, according to Mel, he found Kaplan sitting in a chair with his tallis and tefillin reading John Dewey. And students loved that story. But the story that I love the most, and I don't know whether you've ever written this one up, Mel, maybe you have, is that when he was 95 or so, Mel said to Kaplan, why don't I just leave my answering machine on? And whenever you get an idea, just call me and leave me a message on the machine. That way I won't miss any of your wonderful thoughts. And so he said that one day he opened up the machine and he heard Rabbi Kaplan say, I just understood the Shema for the first time. And then he went on to explain what it is he understood about the Shema. I don't remember what that was because that wasn't what was important about the story. The important part about the story was that he was still reflecting on what the Shema was, and he actually believed that at 95, he finally understood it for the first time. So over the years, I taught recon. I didn't teach it. I gave it up to Deborah Waxman because she was really a specialist. She had studied Kaplan for her PhD, which I did not. And over the years, I didn't teach recon anymore. However, during the pandemic, the first summer of the pandemic, when we were all still learning how to use Zoom, I did teach a semester of Recon 1 in 2020, the summer of 2020. And I went back today to look at my notes to see which pieces of the diary I thought would be most interesting to our students then. So I'm bringing you up to date to RRC as of 2020. I can't tell you about RRC in 2024 because I'm not there anymore. But in 2020, I found a bunch of things that were absolutely fascinating to the students from the diaries. And where I went with the diaries, if I will allow myself, I'll just do it very quickly there. I was told 5 to 7 minutes, so I'll try to stick to that. One was in January 4th, 1936, when Kaplan reported that there was a very big altercation in his Sabbath table. Judith, Selma, and Naomi ran away shouting from the table. They had been fighting about Palestine and the Jews in Palestine and the Arabs and the communists. It was a whole to-do. And when he rounded them back up, he Kaplan reflected. And this really hit the students because so much of this is happening in our world today. He reflected, all my efforts to build up Jewish life, perhaps they are futile. If with the home background such as my children have, they can question for a minute the legitimacy of the Jewish hope to find a home in Palestine, what can I expect from the thousands of young people who have never had a chance to learn of the spiritual values latent in Judaism, or to see its more beautiful, significant aspects? I was convinced my life was a failure. So I could, go on all day with the fascinating way in which Kaplan's self-confidence oscillates back and forth and his self-doubt. But one of the things that the students found most fascinating was that he struggled about statism Zionism, state Zionism. He said in 1935, February 9th, I want to do the right thing. I want to teach what is right with every fiber of my being. And I don't want to commit myself wholeheartedly without sinning against my better judgment. But I have to look at some of the judgments which communism passes upon the idealism. It may be mistaken, but I still find that there is something raging in my soul. I have to find a way out of the dilemma. I feel like I have an inner conflict. So he went through a lot of this process of struggle, and the students really found that very, very interesting. He also said the ways in which he differed from Magnus and Buber. He went to Magnus and Buber's home, or Magnus's home, in March of 39, and they were responding to Gandhi's critique of Jews' settlement in Israel. And he said, I find their response to the critique self-degradating. I was disgusted by the tone. It is most unmanfully apologetic. So this is not to say, I'm not giving kind of like an advertisement here for where Kaplan landed or where he was. What I want to share is that the students found it interesting to see the various pieces of the story and how they get repeated in new forms even today. I will close by saying that I was very, very excited about teaching the 1941 new Haggadah and the way in which that was rolled out, because the way in which he was responded to that was his own employers, his own colleagues. He received so much criticism. And here we are so many years later, still using that Haggadah. And one of the criticisms was that Jewish unity will suffer. And it said, they said to him, the making of Haggadahs ad libitum will introduce anarchy into Jewish life. And it was such a laugh because here we are with the making of Haggadahs ad libitum, and everybody agrees that that was one of the best things that's ever happened to Judaism. And this diversity is great. And yet this is a guy who was able to withstand a lot of criticism for being the one who stuck his nose out and did it. So, and with that, I will close my own remarks and say, Mel, I miss you. I just saw you recently. I was in New York and we had coffee and it was wonderful to see you. I appreciate so much your helping to make Kaplan not only more interesting and more complicated, but just more colorful, more alive. We always thought he wasn't very playful. You had said something in one of your biographies that his mother didn't let him play. And that stuck with me. And we used to talk about that in class, about how the theology wasn't playful. And it was true. And you helped us understand that. And so I want to thank you again and again and again. And looking at aging, I'm not sure I wish you 120, but I do wish you many more years of health and happiness with Barbara.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm very moved by what you said.
And yes. Thanks, Nancy, for that, and those wonderful references to those pieces of the diary that Mel, has really brought to our attention and has made it possible to have the kind of dialogue that you spoke of. It's now my pleasure to call on Netta, one of the Teen Prize winners.
Hi, I'm Netta Ruderman. I'm 12, and I'm going to be answering question 3 from the literary prize. Okay. From an outsider's perspective, the Jewish community looks like it's becoming less and less committed to their faith over time. Less often do we see youth eager to go to temple or studying the Talmud willingly. However, what the older generation fails to consider is that as our religion ages, so do the traditions associated with it. What was viewed as Jewish tradition 100 or 1,000 years ago is different from what Jewish tradition is developing into today. We're all intertwined with our ancestors and their beliefs, but a key part of maintaining that web is making change for ourselves. As we see the youngest generation develop their identities within Judaism, we have to realize that their differing perspectives are building the future. Judaism is one long conversation, and the words within can mean something else to each person. For a kid whose grandfather is the best cook they know, maybe Judaism is making an Israeli meal with him and saying a blessing before dinner. For a boy who always dreamed of having a family that stayed together, Judaism could be growing up and inviting both sides of his family to a Seder, or even a normal dinner. And for a girl whose brain works in words, Judaism can be what she feels when she writes page upon page, showing and explaining anything she believes. Even an essay about departing from tradition, when her family itself isn't actually that traditional. Going to temple or saying blessings before meals is definitely an important part of Judaism in my eyes, but departing from tradition and creating our own versions of it doesn't decrease the likelihood of Judaism's survival at all. Actually, it's an example of how people develop and how beneficial change sparked by youth is for Judaism throughout time. Thank you, and happy birthday, Mel.
Oh, thank you for that. That was a wonderful, and thanks for being here to read that in person. The next speaker, Vered Salkal, is somebody who I think, at least I know in good part because of Mel's real interest in finding people who are writing on things related to Kaplan and bringing them to all of our attention. Vered is the Bertram and Gladys Aaron Professor of Jewish Studies at Christopher Newport University. She holds a PhD in Jewish thought from the Hebrew University. She was ordained as a rabbi by Hebrew Union College in Jerusalem. Her fields of research are religious studies, modern Jewish thought, liberal theory, and subaltern studies. She's the author of multiple articles, including Realism, Pluralism, and Salvation, Reading Mordechai Kaplan through John Hick, which is a topic that we had the pleasure of exploring with her at a recent Kaplan Center webinar. And there was a chance that she wasn't going to make it back because she was traveling, but she's made it back on time, and we're thrilled to have you as part of this webinar. Barrett.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? ברכות חמות מתל אביב. מזל טוב למל סקאלט. I just arrived home to Israel an hour ago, rushing from Ben Gurion Airport home to join the Zoom meeting. And it was super important to me to be part of this conversation, not only enjoying the opportunity to wish Mel עד 120, may we all get to live 100 good years. And there's so much work we still need for you to do for us, but also be a part of this community, which continues not only exploring and celebrating the past, but also thinking, what can we do? What should we do? What can be done in order to ensure a living Jewish future for all of us? And I think this touches on the voices that we have already heard from younger people, young people, and, people of my age, talking about the place Kaplan and Mel Scult have in their life, personal life, and their scholarship, and their Jewish quest, which I think changes through the ages and as we explore ourselves as teenagers, adults, parents, and so on. So I will start by repeating what everybody else said, mentioning Mel's huge contribution to our duty as Jewish leaders, rabbis, scholars, parents, congregation members, to making Jewish present, because without it, we won't have a past. And I think while we celebrate the achievements of Mel Scult, I think one of them is Mel's exceptional ability to be a bridge, a true bridge between past and future. Mordechai Kaplan, of course, I've never met him, but reading Mel's work and other people's work, it seems like he was a very charismatic person, aside from being a great scholar. And sometimes this doesn't work to the benefit of the scholar once he passes, when many of his pupils actually choose the way of hagiography, talking about the person and the charisma and not about the ideas. And if we want something to last for a long time, I think the idea has more years of life than the personality. And Mel Scult's work actually allows us to celebrate not only the person, Mordechai Kaplan, but I think more importantly is the scholarship. And without the ability to allow people to get to know Kaplan's work, which is actually very sophisticated and spans decades of work, without Mel Scult, we wouldn't be able to think about next generations of scholars. And this is where Mel's work comes into play, because I think a lot of people knew Kaplan and adored the personality and the person, but in Mel being one of them, but also taking on the responsibility of making sure that people know not only about the person, but I think more about the ideas, and also about their complexity and the fact that they're not always perfect and they're not always, go well together. But I think that promises us, the scholars, many, many more years of research into Kaplan's work, and that would have not been possible without Mel Scult doing the enormous work he keeps on doing. And I wish all of us, especially to you, Mel, bריאות טובה, but to all of us, there is so much more that we need to see, we need to read, we need to know, we want to know. And without your labor, it wouldn't be there. So I think in this sense, Mel, aside from being a great scholar, is an essential, we always talk about the missing link when we talk about evolution. I think that without Mel's work, without him being the link between Kaplan, the person, and the future of Kaplan's scholarship, without the books that Mel is publishing, without getting to know him in person, and then being so, his passion is catching. I met Mel for the first time 10 years ago. And when you see someone talk so passionately about his work, about his project, about his life work, it's really catching. And that was one of the points that pushed me into a deeper reading of Kaplan. So I won't say more. I'll just finish with saying that אנשי כנסת גדולה במסכת אבות אמרו 3 דברים. הבו מתונים בדין והעמידו תלמידים הרבה ועשו סייג לתורה. And how fortunate all of us are that we still have rabbi scholars among us in the 21st century who have both the faith and the practice to raise many, many disciple students. Without Mel, Kaplan scholarship would have not been possible. תודה רבה מל, תלמידיך ותלמידותיך אנחנו, וממימיך אנחנו שותות. תודה רבה מל, יום הולדת שמח.
Thanks for that, Farad. So you heard earlier on that one of the submissions, the final one that we're going to get to see, the final submission, uh, was from Vanilla Shapiro, a former ex-Canadian, and she submitted something artistic. Vanilla, do you want to say something about it before Sheridan shows it?
Yeah, sure. So, like I said in uh, I grew up not really knowing or like seeing other branches and other types and forms of Judaism. And then this past summer, when I got to go to Havaya, I got to experience and see the Reconstructionist Judaism and kind of understand more about like the different forms of Judaism. And then after, I also looked into it and kind of tried to learn more. And I in camp, we like the praise and stuff for the like Reconstructionist form. And then also now I'm in America and I'm by my cousins, and we also were going to like a Reconstructionist synagogue. And I think it's really special to like see how Judaism could be a lot of different things, like races and different people that all come together and form one thing that is Judaism, and everyone has something in common, but everyone is different in their own special way. Happy birthday.
Thanks. We're going to see the beautiful artwork that came from that. Sheridan, can you run the video?
Growing up in an Orthodox community in Israel, I'm not really exposed to other branches of Judaism. This past summer, I was lucky and blessed to be at Camp Havaya, where I learned so much about the different colors of Judaism. I hope to incorporate what I've learned into this project. My work portrays many different faces representing Jewish people across the spectrum of Judaism. A scarf, a black velvet kippah, a wig, and more. I added my own take in designing a logo inspired by my idea that we need to realize that Jewish people come in all shapes and colors, but what brings us together is the concept of tikkun olam, thus making the world a better place.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing that with us. Really a very beautiful project. The next speaker is somebody who I've known for a good number of years, but I've never had the opportunity to introduce, I think. And that's our board president, Jane Susswine. And she's been involved with the Reconstructionist movement since 1978, when she and her husband joined B'nai Keshet in Montclair, New Jersey. She served on the regional and then national board of the Jewish Reconstructionist Federation and served as president for 4 years, which is when I think I met you originally. But in addition to all the wonderful work she does for the Kaplan Center and has done for the Reconstructionist movement prior to that, she helped found the Montclair Community Pre-K, a unique public-private partnership whose mission is to allow any child to have an affordable high school preschool education. And she continues to serve on its board. And if I can add a personal note, when Dan Cederbaum passed away, there was, of course, a major challenge about how we were going to manage to keep this work, which he started, going. And Jane, if you hadn't stepped up and say, yeah, I'd be willing to, to take a role in running this board and doing all the wonderful things that you've done, I really don't think we would have been able to pull this off. So it's wonderful to be able to pass the moment on to you now.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you. My dear Mel, how I have come to love and admire you. Let me count the ways. More than 50 years ago, you embarked on a journey of getting to know this man, Mordechai Mendel Kaplan, rabbi, thinker, innovator, and of documenting his life and thought. I wonder if you could have imagined the extent that his life and thought would have taken over your own. And what a blessing for all of us whose life as Jews has been enriched, and in my case, made possible as a Reconstructionist. The mission of the Kaplan Center is to demonstrate the continued relevance of Kaplan's thinking in the 21st century. You are a driver of this mission. A short commercial break. Arnie Eisen talked about the pamphlet that you wrote, 8 Core Principles of Kaplanian Philosophy. It is available on our website, and if you'd like hard copy for your or multiples for your synagogue study group, just contact the Kaplan Center. Mel, on an almost daily basis, you gift us with excerpts from Kaplan's vast oeuvre, always illuminating a current event, predicament, or time of year. And at 90, you're right up with the times with an active Mordechai M. Kaplan Facebook page. On a more personal level, I treasure our partnership. Transcribing the audio tapes you made at the beginning of your adventure with Kaplan was an adventure for me. Nancy is no longer here, but the retelling of Kaplan's story about his revelation of the meaning of the Shema was part of these tapes, and he was over 90 at the time. What a treasure. I've come to admire your diligence as the scholar. You studied Kaplan's work for a year before approaching him to tell him you wanted to write his biography. When he refers to another thinker, you delve into the work of that thinker, Emerson, Dewey, Royce, for years. And then you turn around and write a book about these influences on Kaplan's thinking. You are a blessing. I treasure your friendship and wish you many, many years of good health and work. I love you.
Thanks.
I can't thank you enough, Jane, for everything that you've done for me. An enormous amount of effort on our various projects, which we have cooperated on. And I am deeply, deeply grateful. I think you know that.
Mel, the final speaker before we turn things over to you is Jenna Weissman-Jocelyn, and I think it'll become clear in a second why we've put Jenna right before you. Jenna is the Charlie Smith Professor of Judaic Studies and Professor of History at George Washington University, and she's the author of a forthcoming biography of Mordechai Kaplan to be published by Yale University Press as part of its Jewish Lives series. And if I could add a personal note, just being able to, have a bit of an email back and forth with you over the years that you've been working on this project. It's so clear to me that that this book is going to be a wonderful, wonderful contribution and a very nice complement to the work that Mel has done for us. The first time I came to know your scholarship was through your book, New York's Jewish Jews, the Orthodox Community in the Interwar Years, where you also dealt with Kaplan very well. And Jenna is a very prolific scholar and also works for Rights in the Forward and the Jewish Review of Books. If you saw the issue with the nice kind of drawing of Kaplan on the cover, and it's just a real joy to be able to have you here today.
Tell her to mute herself.
Yeah, you have to unmute.
Okay. Mordechai Menachem Kaplan was known far and wide as a rabbi, a theologian, a philosopher, a teacher, a critic, and the founder of Reconstructionism. He could also lay claim to being a diarist of the very first order, a Jewish Samuel Pepys, but that wasn't common knowledge. though it wasn't exactly a secret either. From time to time, Kaplan would invite a select number of students and colleagues into his Holy of Holies, his study at 415 Central Park West in Manhattan. He'd throw open a closet door and voila, have them gaze upon shelves filled with ledger-sized handwritten accounts of how he had come to be Mordechai M. Kaplan. Over the years, there had also been talk of publishing some of the diary's entries, but invariably their creator pulled back at the very last moment, fearful lest their contents offend or be misinterpreted. It wasn't until 1972, over half a century after having begun this practice, when Kaplan took a young Mel Scult into his confidence, inviting him to write his life story, that the prospect of airing the diary's contents became a reality. Mel recalls having been overwhelmed by the imposing sight of what Kaplan himself likened to a large mountain. Little did the aspiring biographer know what lay in store as he set about researching and writing his account, drawing on the diaries as its armature. Rich in smart and cutting observations, and in dense philosophical ruminations, awash in emotion, filled with both doubt and certitude, the diaries are a treasure trove, which Mel was the first to have exhaustively mined. Nothing if not meticulous. Mel also read whatever Kaplan read, no matter how arcane or recherché. He talked at length with family members, colleagues, and congregants, and diligently made his way through Kaplan's extensive correspondence with anybody who was anybody in 20th century American Jewish life. Perhaps the only aspect of Kaplan's life at which Mel drew the line was consuming one of his subjects' favorite dishes, creamed asparagus, on toast. Little wonder, then, that this project, which resulted in the magisterial Judaism faces the 20th century, took decades to complete. More than just a compendium of fascinating details, a cascade of revelations, its 400-plus pages argued for Kaplan as a towering intellectual figure who more than held his own with the very best thinkers in and of modern America. Though in his lifetime, and posthumously, the self-styled maverick was often dismissed by critics as more sociologist than theologian, Mel would have none of that. By his lights, the founder of Reconstructionism could only be understood as the architect of an exciting new way of thinking about the relationship among God, nature, and man, the weight of Jewish history, the balance between tradition and modernity, and the tension between choice and commandedness. Mindful of Kaplan's crotchets, Mel was more inclined to soft-pedal than explore them, lest they divert the reader's attention from what truly mattered, or, worse still, weaken the reputation he worked so assiduously to secure for his subject. His is an intellectual biography through and through. Ideas, rather than personality or incident, inhabit its pages. Kaplan would have been pleased, very pleased. While he didn't live to see the actual biography, he had a very keen sense of what was to come, thanks to Mel having made a point of keeping him informed of his progress. The happiest moments in my life these days, Kaplan recorded in his diary in 1974, are those when I receive letters from Mel Scult. Happy birthday, Mel. Many, many more.
Thanks for that, Jenna.
I can't tell you how excited I am by coming to know you and meeting with you and discussing Kaplan. And I very, very much look forward to your book, which will appear in 2026 from Yale. And I hope everybody will buy a copy. And
Me
read
too.
it.
Me too.
We'll definitely have Jenna back to share some of the work once it's published. If we all look forward to hearing what your thoughts are. And our final word goes to Mel Scult himself. I'm not going to introduce him because that seems superfluous at this point. And it's my pleasure just to stand aside. And Mel, the floor is yours.
Well, I'm somewhat overwhelmed, and as I said, after Arnie's speech, I feel in a certain sense of being at my own funeral. And I'm very, very grateful for everything that everybody said. I think, as you know, I have been a collector for a great many years. It's really one of the fundamental passions of my life to rescue pearls of wisdom from the deep and from oblivion. Most recently, as Jason from Fordham will attest, I have been reading Walter Benjamin, or Benji, as he was known to his friends. Benjamin was a German Jewish thinker from the early 20th century who was a close friend of many German Jewish intellectuals, primarily Gershom Scholem and Hannah Arendt. Scholem has written a very interesting work, which I recommend, which is called The Story of a Friendship, which is about their relationship. I am drawn to Benjamin because he is deeply provocative. He shakes me up in thinking ways that never occurred to me and that are very unsettling. For example, how could you maintain that by collecting you destroy? It is obviously paradoxical to make such a statement, and yet this is what I find in Benjamin, or more precisely in the works of Hannah Arendt about Benjamin. This sounds more like Kafka than anyone else. And of course, Shalom and Benjamin were entranced when they discovered Kafka in the late 20s and early 30s. Hannah Arendt, in her introduction to a selection of Benjamin's essays called Illuminations, quotes the following statement from Benjamin about the collector. And that's me, of course. The true, greatly misunderstood passion of the collector is always anarchistic, destructive. Arendt goes on to explain the collector destroys the context in which his subject once was only part of a greater living reality. Truth to tell, this statement stabs me to the core. In other words, in collecting, we remove the object, in my case, the Kaplan quotation, from its original context, and according to Benjamin, we distort it. We destroy its original meaning because we have lifted it out of its original context. My life, my whole scholarly life here comes into question, for I have lifted Kaplan's statements out of their temporariness and made them permanent by publishing them. What could be more temporary than what we write in our diary? A passing thought which we entertain for a moment and then move on. We think it now, but tomorrow we will think its opposite. And so we must approach a diary with care. I have always felt that the diary represented a fundamental aspect of Kaplan's mind. In anything we write, we are always drawn to consistency. The point must be clear, and we must not contradict ourselves, even in this short talk that I'm making, I shouldn't contradict myself. But it is a very big but. In a diary, the form draws us to say one thing today and another thing tomorrow. Inconsistency is the hallmark of diary thinking, a term I have invented, and goes to the very core of who Kaplan was. And that is why he was a compulsive diarist. In other words, Kaplan stands on so many issues on both sides of the fence. This is particularly the case in his theology and his God statements. It's so difficult to pin him down, and I have spent years trying to pin him down on God, as other scholars. Vered's essay is wonderful on this, which you can read on the Kaplan website, and you should read other essays on Kaplan on the Kaplan website. The point is that he is always presented to us as a pragmatist, which of course he was. And Nadav Safran has made much of this in his work. But pragmatism is essentially an open philosophy. What works today may not work tomorrow. Santayana, the student and later colleague of William James, stated that James could never make up his mind and always wanted to leave matters open for later possibilities. And so I ask myself, is Kaplan really a pragmatist? Does he really accept the full implications of his approach? I wonder about that. What I have learned from Kaplan is that to be alive is to grow. And I would like to think that my feelings expressed here represent a significant becoming, a growing, even with all my doubts, and even at my age and stage. So these are my thoughts, and I am enormously grateful for today.
Thanks for this, Mel. And before we just kind of take the spotlight off of one individual, just open it up just for people to, speak to you directly who are on this call. Jane Susswine, our board president, just wanted to bring to our attention something that is in process, and there's still time to contribute to it. Jane.
Thank you, Eric. For the past month or so, I have had the absolute delight of putting together a journal with tributes and essays from Mel's admirers. So if you have not had a chance to send in a tribute, Jane at kaplancenter.org, I would be more than happy to include them. And along with that, if you'd like to support the work of the Kaplan Center so we have more wonderful events of this sort, we, of course, welcome your contributions. So, Barbara, do you have something you'd like to say or do? You're muted. Barbara, you're muted. Okay. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Mel.
This is Susan Beckerman, a longtime friend and a member of our congregation, and a strong supporter of the Reconstruction movement. Look at that. Right. Somebody must have told you how much I like carrot cake.
Wish I could be there.
Okay.
I think we can open it up so people can talk with one another.
Happy birthday.
What a wonderful surprise.
Well, Jane was
Jane, this is Dennis. Could I just make a very brief comment in thanking?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I wanted to thank Mel for that incredible, succinct, and profound presentation. I would call it the Gettysburg Address of Reconstructionism. So much said in such a brief and profound way. It reminded me of two things. One, Mel, as you well know, the ancient rabbis did not want to commit to writing the oral Torah. They wanted to keep it oral because they felt that committing it to writing would freeze it. On the other hand, they saw the necessity of writing it in order to teach it and to transmit it. And what you expressed through Walter Benjamin and through Kaplan's own existential reality, it gives form and expression to that. You take it out of context, what do? Do you perpetuate it, or do you somehow distort it? But we must perpetuate and then learn the oral tradition behind the written tradition. And of course, Walt Whitman, who reminded us, do I contradict myself? Very well, then, I contradict myself. I am vast. I contain multitudes. So you have allowed us to bring the multitudinous Kaplan into a clearer understanding, and thank you for that. Can't hear you. Can't hear. We can't hear you, Mel.
No, see if your microphone is covered by something.
Mel, is your volume up?
No, you're completely gone.
Well, maybe go off speaker.
Wait, that's it. Mel, say something.
Let me go into the other.
We heard Barbara. Mel, say something. Pull back a little bit, Barbara.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you right there. So pull back a little
Mel,
bit.
so you should be where I am, Mel. Mel?
Just back up. That's perfect right there. Back up. Perfect.
I don't know, Jane, how you want. Eric, are you going to wind this up? Eric?
Yeah, well, we're going to just, I'm sure there's other people who might want to say something before we close off. So we're just inviting people to unmute and speak. And if no further people want to speak, we'll bring the webinar to the close for sure.
I just like to.
Oh, I hear it. I hear a Wolofsky somewhere here.
Yes,
where are you?
I just like to repeat at the 100th birthday celebration, Kaplan thanked us for being present, and then he said, "You're not honoring me, you're honoring the work which I have done to make Judaism meaningful for you, but the work must continue if Judaism is to grow and to be meaningful for our future, our children and their children in return." And he was 100 years old when he wrote that. And those words, I have to find them, were given to me by Rivka. But he didn't say them, he changed it. And as she said to me, you know, Kaplan, he'll always change what he wants to say.
This is Susan Beckerman. The quotation that Jack just offered was in the video that we made when we were working on oral history several years ago. So there, and it was very interesting because we were on a budget, and the cost of getting that little piece of clipping from CBS exceeded our entire budget. So we instead hired an actor who read the words on Rabbi Kaplan's behalf in our film. So someone has that, and we can get the exact words. But thank you. I'm heartened to remember that.
And also, I'd like to mention, Mel, when Kaplan was in the 90s, and I brought a young Israeli to meet him who was arguing the God of my fathers, and Kaplan said, finally, you can have any God you want, but you can't have the Jewish God, Yah, unless you have the Jewish people. The Jewish people was paramount to him, and its future.
That's Jack Wolofsky, who, when we talk on the phone, I always get some wonderful Kaplanian formulation, which he just gave. Thank you, Jack.
I'd
like to say a word if I could. My name is Neil Newman, and I want to congratulate Mel and thank him for his presentation. I don't know if you remember me, Mel, from years and years ago. But the reason I just wanted to, first of all, say thank you and congratulations on your 90th birthday. And wanted to just share a personal event that I had in the early period of my cantorate. I was in a congregation in Philadelphia in the late 60s. And I think in 1970, I brought a USY group from my congregation to Mordechai Kaplan's 90th birthday celebration. I'm not sure the year, whether it was 70 or 69. And the group had composed a rock seder, first of its kind. Okay, and what was so impressive was when Kaplan arose and praised the work and praised the young people who had created the Seder, and it certainly was consistent with his commitment to the arts and to culture as a very important part of his ideology. But it's a very nice it's a nice memory for me, especially on this your 90th birthday celebration. So Mazal Tov.
Thank you.
Does anybody else want to say something?
Hi, Mel.
מלווין.
Mel.
מרונן שלומית. מלווין, מזל טוב ליום ההולדת. מאוד מרגש לראות את כל האנשים שהתקבצו כאן לכבודך, שאתה נוגע להם בלב, ושאוהבים אותך, ומברכים אותך. אז אנחנו מצטרפים לברכות, ומאחלים הרבה הרבה מזל טוב מכל המשפחה פה בישראל.
עד 120.
That's my cousin's son's wife. Thank you from Kfar Saba.
Hey, Lisa.
I just hope that we will still, I have traveled to Israel every year for very, very many years, but at my age and stage, it's a little bit difficult, and I'm not sure whether we'll be able to make it again, but I hope so.
Mel, many thanks and much love, and more thanks and much love
Julie and David Friedman.
Oh, wow.
Mel, I just learned something from you, but of course I learn something from you all the time. This is Alan, West Side.
Alan, God help.
Yes. To the degree that there is currently a respectable American conservative political philosophy, Leo Strauss of the University of Chicago is certainly one of the godfathers of that. And what Strauss and Straussians teach, among other things, is that when you look at, say, the works of John Locke, and you find some inconsistencies and even contradictions, they try to extract meaning. They read into the contradictions some ultimate truth. But you've pointed out through Kaplan that to err is human, that we inevitably contradict ourselves. We inevitably go back to some degree on what we've said. And it reminded me, I've always been uncomfortable with the Straussians, but you've given me an intellectual basis rather than a purely emotional basis to carry forward with my continuing antagonism. Thank you, Mel, and happy birthday.
Well, thank you for that, Alan. I enjoy your blog, which Alan publishes every Shabbat, very, very much, about his adventures of different kinds. Okay.
All right, so then I think we're coming to conclusion here. So thank you very much for joining us in this wonderful celebration of Mel's wonderful career. I think all these stories about Kaplan in his 90s make clear that we expect you to continue to be productive as you've been throughout these 90s, throughout your 90s, keep continuing in Kaplan's path, who remained productive and germane and engaged. We will be able to share a link to a recording of this event within a couple of days. And that's it. Elisheva, do you want to say something before we close?
Yes. Thank you so much to Emma. Thank you so much to everybody who spoke. Thank you especially to our teens who really gave thought and time to making the Kaplanian vision something modern and then gave it back to us. And most especially, thank you to Mel for your heart, for your dedication, for your wisdom, for your insight. I find myself teaching your words to my conversion students miles and miles away, and moments later after I have read them. The strength that you give to us and the insight, the way that we have of seeing text and of seeing a philosophy that endures and develops and grows it's a gift beyond price. And so I am grateful, we are grateful for every second of your 90 years and every bit of your wonderful wisdom. Again, Mazal Tov and happy birthday.
Maybe I'll take the prerogative of the last word.
Yes.
I feel that devotion gives meaning to life. And I have been devoted to Kaplan, to Henrietta Zoll, to Solomon Schechter, to Matilda Schechter, and to trying to bring Judaism into the present moment. Anyway, and I thank you all for this. Is a wonderful, wonderful birthday party. Thank you very, very much.
That's a lot. If we speak and we can hear it.
There's more than that.
Tell me, what did he do, Mel? Mel.
He writes. He's
Sheridan, maybe you could close off the session for us. And thanks for everything that you've done for us today.
All right, we'll close out the room right now. Thank you.